of an uprising in this country that demands an acknowledgement and a correction of a history of violence towards Black people in our country. We see a connection between the systemic white supremacy that is behind criminalization and over-policing of Black communities and the dehumanizing systems that trigger discrimination against all immigrant communities. It's a part of a system that profits off imprisoning immigrants and tearing them from their families. And we stand in support of the movement in this country today that demands our leaders keep all families safe, healthy, and together. Turning to DACA, we congratulate the DACA youth that led this movement and got us to where we are today. These young people continue to inspire us with their determination, their contributions, and their insistence on inclusivity over division. We're lucky to be joined by several DACA recipients today, as well as co-counsel in the DACA case, and an attorney from Public Counsel's Immigrants' Rights Project. We'll hear first from Dulce Garcia, a named plaintiff in the DACA litigation, who's going to talk about her experience as a DACA beneficiary and in the case. Dulce?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned it as a movement, because even to get to win DACA in 2012, it was a lot of heartache, a lot of work, a lot of risk, young undocumented folks putting everything on the line to get to win DACA. But DACA wasn't what was being asked for. In 2012, we were looking for something bigger. We were looking for comprehensive immigration reform. DACA was a compromise, and it was meant to be a temporary compromise while we moved forward to something more. And however, on 2017, September 5th, 2017, this administration rescinded DACA. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, we went ahead and filed a lawsuit on behalf of the close to 800,000 DACA recipients. And I am one of the named plaintiffs on there because we felt an obligation to give back to those folks that had sacrificed so much to get us to that point. When DACA was announced, I was just wrapping up my first year in law school. And I remember I was so excited when President Obama was speaking about us, not only about our contributions, but acknowledging that we're here in the first place. And, you know, we're not in the shadows anymore. We're here, and an acknowledgement of us as people. And that stuck with me. I didn't trust the government right away, so I didn't submit my application right away. It took me 2 years when I graduated from law school that I finally didn't see a risk. I was afraid that my colleagues at school would turn me over to immigration officials. So it took me a while to apply for it. When I finally received my DACA status, it was a life changer. It provided so much opportunity, opened so many doors, just to even get a driver's license. I remember when I went to go get my Social Security, and the gentleman that was there helping me, he had inside of his Social Security Administration office things from his military service on the back. And he said to me, "Congratulations, I know that this has been a long road for you guys." And I started crying. I couldn't hold back my tears. And I remember getting my driver's license for the first time, and it was just it was an amazing feeling. And I felt that again yesterday when we received the good news that we had won our case. It's that feeling of just overjoy for so many folks that now get to experience that, because since 2017, when the program was rescinded, we were only able to renew DACA applications, but new applications were not being taken in. And so last year, over 100,000 undocumented students graduated from high school without the ability to apply for DACA. And so the idea that they can hopefully now start to apply, hopefully soon, it's an incredible moment to know that these folks, young folks, can plan onto their future without one less worry, at least for now.
Thanks, Dulce. I'm going to turn next to Mark Rosenbaum, who heads up our Opportunity Under Law project at Public Counsel and who's co-counsel in the Garcia case.
Well, hello, everybody. This is a sacred day. On behalf of the legal team that represented DACA recipients in the California case, from Public Counsel, in addition to those on this panel, Aida Palma, Will Lacker, Jessica Gomez, Annie Hudson Price, Elisa Hartz, and the law firm of Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher, Luis Cortez, Professor Lawrence Tribe, Dean Erwin Chemerinsky, and Professor Leah Lippman. We want you all to know how privileged we feel to share this life-changing historic victory with you. We realize how fortunate we are that we are all dreamers, and that as dreamers, we have torn down walls of hatred and bigotry. This is a transformative case as part of a transformative movement. I want to talk with you about how significant this victory is. The decision yesterday that overturned the rescission of DACA correctly characterized the cruel action of the Trump administration as arbitrary and capricious. The United States Supreme Court yesterday said that the Trump administration acted arbitrarily and capriciously in seeking to terminate this program. This is just what the nation needed. The landmark opinion by Chief Justice Roberts, the decision was written by the Chief Justice of the United States, means that 700,000 DACA recipients can live their lives in full. They can throw off the brutal threat of removal from the only country that they have ever known. They can continue to give to all of our country, and particularly to the underserved and the disadvantaged. They can do their part to make the United States whole again. There is no United States without the dreamers. There is no United States without the immigrant community. Here is what the dreamers won for all of us. The Supreme Court decision means that the executive branch, the president, and the president's people, for now and forever, will be held accountable for its decisions that seek to upend lives and livelihoods, that would destroy community bonds. The words from Chief Justice Roberts' decision will endure for all time. Here's what he said. He said, from here on out, the government must turn square corners when dealing with the people. The government cannot cut corners. It cannot lie. It cannot use pretext when it engages in actions that intimately affects the lives of the people. Most of all, this ruling, as part of generations of struggle, this ruling is not a ruling of yesterday. It is a ruling of decades and decades of struggle. This ruling means that quality lives count, that real life stories of the brave dreamers, of their families, of the extraordinary immigrant community that we are all part of, that these stories of caring and trust, the government must consider these stories. The government must consider these narratives in its decision-making, not to be blithely treated as political fodder for officials, including the President of the United States, who fail to get, who refuse to appreciate the precious value of love and dignity and community. This was no mere legal victory. It was a victory of the people. against President Trump. And wow, did the people win. And I don't care what sort of unhinged tweets come out the morning after. If the president tries it again, the people will win again. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I'm now going to turn it over to Luis Cortes-Romero. He's the managing partner at his firm Immigrant, Advocacy and Litigation Center, and he joins us from Washington, and he too is a DACA recipient as well as co-counsel in the Garcia case. Thanks for joining us, Luis.
Hi, good afternoon. It's great to be here with everybody and continue to ride the wave of the excitement from yesterday. I very much appreciate Mark's words, and I think he's exactly right that this is a victory of the people, and I think it really reminds us about what got us DACA in the first place, which was a sustained movement by the people that ultimately led to a political concession by President Obama. And so we were able to protect as a people and as a community hundreds of thousands of dreamers. And it's incomplete. We still need protection of other families, but it's a good step forward in the right direction. And one of the things that we set out to do when we think of September of 2017, no one can ever guarantee a win in any case. But what we did guarantee is that they were going to hear our stories, and our stories of our community, and to make sure that we brought this topic up within the American discourse. And I think that we did that in great strides. The DACA program was popular even in 2017, and it brought it to the forefront of millions of other people's homes, and it was made part of the conversation. And it's ultimately the stories that really won this case. If we look at Chief Justice Roberts' decision, he goes to a great strides, talks about the reliance that so many people had on this program, not just the DACA recipients, but the communities. And particularly in light of this pandemic, I think that's really important. So I'm very, very happy to be here with everybody. And this is a great win and a good step in the right direction. And, this isn't also just about, this legal challenge. If President Trump tries to do it again, I know that people like Mark and myself will be there to look at it with a very diligent eye and protect it again. In the same way that we were protecting immigrants' rights in President Trump's predecessor, and the same way we will do it to his successor, we were here to make sure that immigrants' rights are protected. And so I'm very, very grateful to be here, and very grateful to work with public counsel, who has done tremendous amount of work for immigrants' rights beyond the DACA case. It's just been a really great honor to work with all of you, and I'm so glad to share this space with you.
Thank you, Luis, and thank you for your partnership. Before I turn it over to Gina, I'm just going to say a little bit more about the work in the Immigrant Rights Project. So many of us in the project have been working for 20 years. The struggle is a lot longer than that, but we have 20 years working for DACA youth, but really for now 11 million undocumented people who all leave each day not knowing if they'll go home to their families. And so this struggle will not end until we have permanent, humane immigration reform and a path to citizenship for all. I don't want to take away from the joy we feel in this moment, because it is huge. When in 2016, the Obama administration announced the DACA program, we not only were instrumental in helping implement that and train advocates across the country on the process for those DACA cases, but we opened up clinics, and so that meant our staff would end their job at 6 p.m. and instead of going home, they'd go to our basement where they'd help hundreds of young people every evening and every weekend apply for DACA. And if you went into that basement room and saw the lines of laptops and volunteers and youth eager to have their paperwork done, you saw in one moment the bankruptcy of our immigration policies. You saw a room full of extraordinarily talented, capable young people forced into a situation that no young person should be dealing with. Told they didn't belong when this was their only home. Many of them took buses after school for 4 hours to get to our office. Since 2016, there's been a real extension of capacity and so much amazing work in California and across the country in training advocates to prepare the community to educate people about their rights, about the law, and to get people the DACA benefits. And Gina Amato has been an integral part of that. And so I'm going to introduce our senior staff attorney, Gina, to talk a little bit about her work and what first-time applicants should be looking at right now, as well as DACA recipients who are going to need to renew their DACA. Gina?
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. It is such an honor and a pleasure to be here today. The first thing that I want to do is just congratulate you, Dreamers. Congratulations. We are so excited and so proud of you. It is your courage, your vision, and your leadership that has brought us to this moment and is really what is going to help us move forward and secure a permanent path to citizenship for all 11 million undocumented immigrants in this country. So thank you. Thank you for your contributions thus far, and we look forward to continuing this fight well into the future. I also want to recognize that this decision comes at a monumental time in history, right on the heels of a huge civil rights victory for the LGBTQ community on the eve of Juneteenth and in the midst of an uprising, and at a time when the Black community is demanding racial, social, and economic justice. And the fact that all of these things are happening at the same time really underscores the deep connections between these movements. And it's inspiring to me to see the solidarity, the shows of solidarity that are happening in the streets and in our communities in attacking and rooting out systemic racism and oppression. But we also have to recognize that not everybody is going to be celebrating and moving forward in a positive light. There are some people in our community that will be looking to take advantage of this moment and to prey on the immigrant community at this time. So one of the things that I want to talk about for a moment is notario fraud. Notario fraud is a systemic problem that we've seen in our communities for decades, and that is when individuals hold themselves out as attorneys or people authorized to provide legal services. Oftentimes, they can be friends of the family or even other family members, individuals from your community, individuals who may speak your native language, and maybe someone who is familiar to you. But we see scores of people come through our office who have been victims of this type of fraud and who pay money only to be placed in more risky situations than they ever were. So it is more important now than ever before to seek consultation from a licensed, reputable attorney. There are lots of resources in the Los Angeles area. You can contact public counsel or community organizations such as CHIRLA, Carecen, the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles, LA Center for Law and Justice. Forgive me if I've forgotten, there's so many partners out there, the Immigration Center for Women and Children, as well as the law school clinics, the Loyola Immigrant Justice Clinic, Southwestern Immigration Clinic. There are a lot of resources in our community, so please contact one of us. If you do go to somebody that you're not sure whether or not that person is a licensed attorney, there are things that you can do to protect yourself. You can ask for receipts for payment. You can certainly ask for copies of your paperwork. You can ask that person straight up whether or not they're a licensed attorney and what state that person is licensed in. It can be tricky to verify whether or not an attorney is licensed to practice immigration law because you can be licensed in any state in the United States. For an attorney that is licensed in California, you can look them up on the California State Bar website and just do a general Google search. So I won't get too far in the weeds, but all of that to say, please protect yourself in this time. There are people that will be seeking to take advantage, so protect yourself. It is also very important at this time to seek legal consultation if you're undocumented, particularly if you or a member of your family, has been a victim of crime. The crimes that I am speaking to particularly are domestic violence, sexual assault, shooting, kidnapping, or really any other serious crime. There are forms of immigration relief available to immigrants who have been victims of crime in the United States and who have cooperated with law enforcement in the investigation of the crime. Really importantly, there's no time limit on this. So even if you were a victim of child abuse many years ago or a victim of a violent crime many years ago, it is worth consulting with an attorney to see if you might be eligible for a U visa or some other form of humanitarian immigration relief. So again, congratulations. We celebrate you in this time. We look forward to continuing to serve you and fight with you and alongside you for a permanent pathway to citizenship. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. And I just want to invite anyone listening to send in their questions via the chat function, and we'll try to get to them. I'm going to add a little bit more to what Gina said and then ask our panelists some additional questions. There is a remedy that does have a deadline, and that's something called special immigrant juvenile status. So if you're a young person who's never had a consultation with a lawyer, and that might probably true if you've never had the opportunity before to apply for DACA, it is important to talk to someone really knowledgeable who's an attorney. This is a path to a green card. A lot of people growing up in single parent families are eligible. One of the main requirements is that you have one parent who's not supporting you in any way, who's been neglectful or abusive, or you've simply never known. So I just wanted to flag that in case there are people in that situation out there. And I don't see any questions yet, but I want to ask Luis or Mark, we've seen the president continue to enjoy his tweet storms and make some vague threats. What is the remedy that you can pursue on behalf of the DACA class if the government does not now accept applications for renewals and new applications from DACA recipients who are first timers?
Luis, why don't you start?
Yeah, so, I think in terms of the guidance I would give first-time applicants would be at minimum to start getting some of your paper ready while we seek guidance to see what's happening and the dust settles a little bit more. We know that first-time applications are massive. They include a lot of paperwork. And so making sure that you have that ready is going to be really important. Now, President Trump, I think, is well known for having very charged tweets that sometimes when we see what ends up happening on a more technical side, they don't really end up having a lot of teeth into it. And so, we're not to be taking some of his comments lightly. We will be looking at them. But, it reminds me to some extent about what he did in the census case where he lost and he kept saying he was going to put the question in the census and then it didn't happen. And so it's a bit unclear, but I think what we should be doing now is getting at least things ready. To be able to apply, because if the DACA program does happen to be terminated again, or he attempts to terminate it, what we saw from this last go around was that the renewals were the ones that kept going, not the initial applications, and a lot of people were left out because of that. So it may be a good idea, depending on how things are moving forward, to reapply so that you can continue to renew while we challenge this. And so, there's a few unanswered questions, but we will be keeping an eye on it. And I think that the best thing to do right now is to at least get ready, because it does take some time to get all of that together. And we want to be ready for when, if the Department of Homeland Security allows for applications to come in, to then assess the evaluation at that point and apply if it seems safe to do so while we figure out what President Trump continues to tweet around. We also know that the November's coming and that DACA is an overwhelmingly supported program, and that if he is going to try to terminate DACA in the light of pandemic, and if he's going to follow Chief Justice Roberts' decision, which is that he has to consider all of the consequences, he's going to have to tell the American people, I'm going to throw away this program despite all of the benefits and despite all of the consequences. I don't care about any of you. And then come November, people are going to have to start making some decisions. So his decision to do so is not going to be cost neutral. But again, we will keep a close eye on it to see what happens.
I wonder if I could add 3 points to what Luis has set out. First of all, if he tries it again, as Luis mentioned, we'll stop him. It's not something that can be done overnight in terms of him trying to rescind it. It's going to take a significant period of time, but we'll stop him. And we've gone to court before, we won this time, and we'll win next time. Secondly, regarding what you've heard Gina and Judy and Luis talk about, we strongly encourage you to, if you have not applied and you're eligible, do it. And if you run into problems, as Judy said and Gina said, work with counsel, work with offices. There are plenty of offices out there with expertise. We're not going to let them screw around with this. We're not going to let them stop that. This is your right. This is not something you have to seek permission for. This is your right. That's what the United States Supreme Court said. That program is back in place, and the government must take these applications. They must process them. They must play by the rules. If you qualify, you will get DACA, and we will be there by your side. But do not be deterred. And the third thing I want to say is this. As part of the case we filed, the government may not use information that is disclosed as part of the DACA process against you or your families or your loved ones or your friends. I want to say that again. The information that the government is seeking, Luis provided that information about himself. We know that that is information that the government has no business using in any enforcement action. And we will stop that. A federal judge in San Francisco, in our case, specifically said that the government may not do that. If you suspect that, if you suspect, or anyone you know suspects that the government is using information from DACA applications against individuals or friends or community, we will stop that in a minute, and we want to know the moment that takes place. But we won, and they're not going to put this program in place again in any sort of way that affects individuals in a negative way. And as I said, this is not a program that anyone needs permission to apply to. This is your right. It is a right that was established by the President of the United States and that was now affirmed by the United States Supreme Court. You've got the law and the government on your side if the president tries to do anything adverse to you.
And I do just want to add on to something that Luis was saying about getting ready. I absolutely agree with getting your paperwork ready, but know that we are still waiting for guidance from USCIS, and there is no wait list or anything. The last time that we were in the midst of the struggle for comprehensive immigration reform, we were hearing reports that notarios were charging people to get placed on a wait list that really didn't exist. So I say that so that you know that we are still waiting for guidance on first-time applicants, as well as I see that there are some questions about advanced parole, and maybe somebody else wants to speak to those. But we are still waiting for guidance. So again, do not pay anybody today, or I don't even think, tomorrow, over the weekend, to be placed on a wait list or to apply quite yet. And again, get in touch with a reputable licensed attorney.
Yeah, I'll just add, Gina touched on it, the advanced parole question. Advanced parole hasn't been available for some time. What advanced parole means, for those of you who may not know the term, it's with DACA, inability to, permission from the USCIS to leave the country and return for brief periods. Everything from visiting your family members to study programs. You can't do that right now. We'll be monitoring that, and there'll be updated guidance. I just also want to flag that we haven't really mentioned COVID, but we're in the middle of the COVID pandemic, and it's hard enough for people to navigate the hurdles they have to navigate to file a DACA application. We've now taken those hurdles and made them twice as high. So mostly I'm saying this just because we're aware of it, and we realize what a stressful time this is for everybody, but particularly for young people who've been waiting so long to navigate and go forward and apply and now be unable to get certain documents. Be careful, wear masks, don't get frustrated. One of the more onerous requirements is the proving up of presence, and often the way one does that is by getting a certified copy of a school record. And that might be difficult to get someone to pick up a phone at a school right now if schools are shut down due to COVID. So hopefully we'll be working with our local elected officials to make sure that there's really efficient avenues and outreach to the community so that you know how to go ahead and get these vital records. Please don't give up. It might take a little bit of time and you're going to need to be patient, but it is going to be really important to figure out ways to interface with the institutions that have the records that are needed.
One of the questions that was asked, Miriam, is about how quickly could, say the Trump administration actually did want to follow through, and in the context of the Supreme Court decision, and as Luis so powerfully said, in the context of 85% of this country supporting the DACA program, say they did decide that they wanted to end the program, how quickly could they do it, and what would they have to do? And it's really important to understand this is not something that the president can send over an email to the Department of Homeland Security and said, end it tomorrow. The Supreme Court has given us a lot of guidance here in terms of what has to be done. It can't be a stroke of a pen ending a program. It has to be a reasoned analysis. That was part of the reason that the rescission was struck down as being arbitrary and capricious. It has to be a reasoned analysis that explains the basics and lays out a record of what supports the reasons that are being done. It's not like just saying stop it. There has to be a record, there has to be evidence, there has to be a basis. Secondly, the Supreme Court also said that because this program has been ongoing since 2012, people have constructed lives and they have made decisions as DACA recipients. As Dulce said at the very beginning, who are the DACA recipients? They're teachers, they're doctors, they're medical workers, they're lawyers, they're legal workers, they're social workers, they're teachers, they're agricultural workers, they're service workers. They are individuals who have built lives. As Chief Justice said, individuals who have decided to have families, to get married. And anyone who makes a decision for the Department of Homeland Security must take those factors into consideration. It's not writing on a blank slate. The government has to recognize, as we said earlier, that people have built lives. You think of a person like Dulce or like Luis, DACA recipients. They have clients. They have cases. They have individuals who have built trust with them. They have ongoing litigation. Teachers have students, often in the most disadvantaged, understaffed areas. Individuals have started companies. The Chief Justice talked about the fact that over the next 10 years, the impact of DACA workers themselves, if it were to end, would cost this country, in the middle of serious economic issues, around $500 billion. Individuals have built companies. They have hired people. The Fortune 500 companies filed papers in our case saying that they depend upon these individuals. The universities in this country, the colleges in this country, the community colleges in this country are filled with DACA students who are seeking to give to their community. In other words, the DACA recipients, they are not outsiders, they are Americans, and they are part of the community, and any decision to attempt to stop that must take that into consideration. It must seriously look at the sorts of lives that have been built, the connections that have been made, and what would be the impact. And the last thing that the Chief Justice told us is that because of the relationships that have been built, the reliances that have been made, the government must consider alternatives to ending the program altogether, to pulling work permits altogether. What am I saying to you? What I'm saying to you is, if the president dare do this again, it isn't anything that can be done quickly or lightly. Remember, I said where people are involved, what the Chief Justice has said is the government must turn square corners. It must actually meet the rules. The government broke the rules. The DACA recipients played by the rules, and the government broke the rules. That's what this case is about. So it isn't anything that can happen shortly. It's something that the public would vet, and it's going to have to be a very detailed explanation, not just some tweet to say this is all over.
Thanks, Mark. We have another question. What's the next step for public counsel in this area? And I think Mark has spoken to an extent on that. I think maybe people don't realize that the current administration continues to try to unlawfully detain and deport DACA youth. That's been happening since 2016. So a significant amount of our detention work at public counsel is to support those youth who are thrown into detention centers and have that terrifying ordeal, and to hold the government accountable for its illegality. And we have no reason, we hope that will stop, but we have no reason to think it will stop given the track record of this administration, the war on immigrants, the war on people of color. Why is it that DACA youth are getting arrested? Often it has to do with the color of their skin, and they're living in communities where there's over-policing, and they're stopped really on the basis of their race. And so we will continue to defend DACA youth who find themselves in detention centers and be part of the broader advocacy, which, as I mentioned, we're advocating not just for permanent protection for DACA youth, but a permanent path to citizenship for the 11 million members of our community are here. So public counsel will be busy. There was a real specific question about the eligibility for a U visa, whether if you never reported a crime, might you still be eligible? Could you report today? And I'll let Gina, who's our U visa expert, comment on that.
Sure, and the reason why we're focusing on U visas in addition to DACA is because when we ran our DACA clinic, such a high percentage of the DACA youth that came through the clinic were U visa eligible. When we started asking, have you ever been a victim of crime? Have your parents or your children ever been victims of crime? So if you were the question here is, if you were a victim of crime years ago and the crime was not reported, can you still be eligible for the visa? Yes, we have had success in helping clients report crime and be able to get the U visa certification, which is a requirement for applying for the U visa. It is possible. I would urge you again to get a consultation so that we can talk specifically about your case. You can either talk with me or somebody else, but it is possible. I do think that you should get a consultation and see if you can apply.
Dulce or Louise, I don't know if you have any more, anything you want to share about the detention of DACA youth, what you see in your parts of, well, Dulce, you in Southern California, and Louise in Washington. I know you've both been involved in really significant cases. I think a lot of people are really unaware of how, just the extent of the illegality we're seeing from federal implementation of immigration laws.
Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead, Dulce, please.
Here in San Diego, we have not just ICE, but we also have Border Patrol as well. And so we know by law that they have jurisdiction within 100 miles of the border to question anyone about their undocumented status. And that covers a big chunk of America, considering that the water line is also a border. But we saw it too with the Black Lives Matters protests that Border Patrol was right in our communities, as it's always been, with the pretext of offering support to local law enforcement. And that is a concern of us, because we know that youth right now want to express what is what they're feeling, as far as what we talked about earlier with the movement that we're seeing. And then we have, DACA youth and people that would have qualified for DACA but haven't been able to because the program has been shut down for new applications on the streets protesting. And it's a real grave concern to have Border Patrol assisting local law enforcement in this way, because thankfully the Supreme Court declined to hear the SB 54 case here in California, specifically the California Values Act distancing immigration enforcement and local law enforcement. But if this president issues emergency orders and dispatches the military or National Guard, or allows Border Patrol to be in our communities to do local law enforcement, it's a big concern of ours, because we have seen it even through COVID-19. Border Patrol has set up checkpoints here in our communities. And so, and this is California, and we know that the president has used California as an example to counter so-called sanctuary laws. So we have unfortunately seen some of these cases, and not just with youth, but generally speaking with the whole immigrant community, and has had an impact with COVID-19, where people are so afraid to even get tested. So this is definitely something that if you do see something, please let us know, let public counsel know, or one of the local organizations in your town know about these circumstances, so that we can take action as organizations, because unfortunately, specifically here in San Diego, we do have this double deportation force. But so many folks just keep quiet because they don't want their case to be used as an example. But feel free to report it in an anonymous way, so that we have this data, so we have this information for us to be able to, at the minimum, question their policies and inquire further through either subpoenas or other requests for information from the government. But I do have another note later that I would want to come back on advanced parole after Luis talks a little bit more about this enforcement.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for those thoughts. I very much agree. And I just want to make a quick note that I think one of the things that are next, at least for myself, and I think for public counsel too, is we're going to continue defending to make sure that DACA youth do not get arbitrarily detained. We're able to get a historic win protecting the structural integrity of the DACA program. Now we just have to make sure that the government continues to play by the rules as it's going through its applications. That means not just randomly detaining someone and coming up with excuses later. Mark and I, or public counsel and I, are working very hard on a case with Daniel Ramirez, one of the first DACA recipients who was detained under the Trump administration. And they're trying to do away with all of the rule books and try to take away his DACA. So we're going to make sure that the Department of Homeland Security does not do things to prohibit DACA applicants from renewing, including too high of fees. We know that that's something that they are trying to do in other circumstances. And we don't want to make sure that they don't have prohibitive measures where they're essentially denying someone the right to apply for DACA. So right now, Mark and I and public counsel and I are working very hard in Daniel Ramirez's case, but as we will continue to do with anybody else who the Department of Homeland Security decides to throw away the rule book and doing their application. So the structural program is in place. We will continue to fight for the individual DACA recipients as they're going through their applications to make sure that their protections are respected.
Thanks, Luis. Dulce, did you want to add to the advanced parole discussion?
Oh, yes, thank you. Just because even after the rescission of DACA, a lot of folks that did have DACA didn't even know what advanced parole was, and they were so sorry that they had never used the opportunity to do so. So I want to take this as an opportunity for those folks. Hopefully the applications open back up soon. But to clarify, before the rescission of DACA, we were able to travel abroad for educational purposes. So if somebody was doing a semester abroad or through a program specifically for education abroad, they would be able to travel for humanitarian reasons. Like, for example, if you had a grandparent that was really sick and dying abroad, you would be able to travel to say your goodbyes. And then for work reasons as well, and you could submit your application for work purposes. There were also more urgent applications before the rescission of DACA. We would be able to walk to USCIS and turn the emergency application and have it processed faster than the slow mail. Of course, with COVID-19, who knows what those guidelines would be now, but we did have this ability to travel abroad, and that brought in a lot of advantages. And it has been a source of a lot of heartache for a lot of us that haven't been able to travel abroad in the last two and a half years since the rescission of DACA. We have seen family members die across the border, and we've had to observe funerals through Skype, if that was even available, because some of our families come from smaller towns where there's no internet. And so we've had to say our goodbyes by phone. It's been a very, very difficult 2.5 years since September 2017 with us not being able to cross that border. And so that's one of the things as a DACA recipient that I really do look forward to. The border right now is closed and only essential travel is permitted. But if, as an example, like work, I'm the executive director of a nonprofit called Border Angels, and I just can't wait to travel and go see the shelters right now where there is over 15,000 people waiting to be able to process their asylum claims and be able to lend a hand. So that's just an example of hopefully what we would be able to do should this process open up and not be challenged by the administration. But again, super important to consult a lawyer. Please don't try to do it on your own because there might be legal repercussions in your specific case. Always consult with one of the organizations like Public Counsel or any other organization that has reputable immigration attorneys to be able to help and even evaluate whether this is something that is an option for you or not.
Thanks, Dulce. Someone else wrote in a question about whether you can have a U visa or if you do, will your DACA be rescinded? And it's really important to know that there are a lot of remedies that take a very long time to realize, and the U visa is one of them. There's a long wait list of many years at this moment, and I'm not gonna get into the weeds of why that's so, but it can take 3 to 5 years to have a U visa adjudicated or more. So there is absolutely no reason you shouldn't be pursuing a U visa despite that wait time. You can continue with your DACA. If and when you were finally granted a U visa, then you can't have both the U visa and DACA. But again, the message is you should be pursuing any remedy that's out there, and you can absolutely pursue the U visa while you're pursuing DACA or have DACA. U visa doesn't offer protection until it's adjudicated and approved. So again, there's a lengthy process, but as we've seen, time marches on. So the sooner you file for a U, the sooner you're going to have that relief secured for you. Gina, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to add, if the U visa is denied, though, the DACA will not be rescinded. And kind of on the contrary, DACA recipients are already highly vetted by the government. So the U visa application, provided that you are a victim of a qualifying crime and can show that you are cooperative in the investigation, they tend to be very, very strong U visa applications. But I also wanted to just sort of underscore a point that Dulce just made. I felt really emotional actually hearing you talk about the struggles of having to say goodbye to family members across the border via phone and go through that grieving process. And it just dawns on me that this is a pretty horrific reality that U.S. citizens are having to face right now in this moment of the pandemic. And I just want to say this so that it's not lost on them that this is a reality that immigrants have to face always, of not being able to cross the border to be with their families and through illness and through death. And so it's a time when we should be reflecting on that it's been really hard on us as a country for these past 2 months, but this is something that immigrants have to deal with all the time. And I just don't want that to be lost. So thank you for mentioning that.
Thanks, Gina. I think we've covered all the questions. I see a couple more asking, are applications being accepted? So it's been maybe a little over 24 hours. I don't think any of us have the answer to that, but the message is move forward and prepare. Don't hand off your money to someone until you get clarification from a reputable source, a licensed, experienced attorney that you vetted, or a community agency. I can't speak for the whole country right now, but in Los Angeles, there are many, CHIRLA, Caresen, Immigrant Center for Women and Children, just to name a few. So there are plenty of resources out there. United We Dream can connect people to resources. So again, I know people are wanting to move forward as fast as possible. We want you to move forward as fast as possible. But in the coming days, we anticipate some firm guidance on that point.
And we'll post on our websites, and the word will get out in terms of what we learned from USCIS. And as we all said earlier, we're not going to let them screw around. We're not going to let them delay what the law says they have to be required. But there are lawyers begging to work on these cases, who are qualified and who know what they're doing. And any of the agencies who've been mentioned, please contact them and they'll help you get to a very qualified lawyer.
So I'm going to give our panelists an opportunity just to give any final thoughts they may have if they choose. And while they ponder that, I just want to thank all of you for tuning in and listening to us. I want to congratulate and thank every single DACA recipient, DACA eligible youth who has brought us to this day, and just express my admiration and inspiration by this movement. So I'm just gonna, Dulce, any parting remarks?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, thank you too for everyone that has been part of a movement in one way or another, whether it's in the legislative front or marching on the streets. This is something that didn't come about, overnight. This was a lot of hard work and organizing by a lot of folks. So just a big thank you to everyone that has been part of the movement, and to have everyone join it, not just specific to DACA issues, but the bigger movement for more humane immigration policies in general. And this is not the end, all of it. This is not going to solve our parents' worries. So we should keep going, do celebrate this very historic moment and enjoy it. But then we have to keep doing the work, making sure that we get the vote out. As disfranchised as we may feel at times, we have to change the composition of the Senate or in Congress if we really do want to have a real solution, a permanent solution for the 11 million folks that are here in the U.S. undocumented, and not compromise our community, specifically for those of us that are in the border. And if we want to see this real change, we really do have to get the vote out, and make sure everyone's counted. Even if we're undocumented, we should all form part of the census. Every single one of us counts, and it's so important to be able to get these resources to our communities. So if you're not too political, then please get involved with the census and making sure everyone is counted for. Thank you.
Thank you, Dulce. Mark?
Well, I just want to say again briefly, thank you. This has been a life-changing experience for me. And just as in our families, we recognize that who we are is because of who came before us. And there are so many individuals whose names we don't know, but who struggled for decades against the worst sort of racism and bigotry that this country has to offer, and who prevailed. And they're the victors. And we stand on their shoulders so that others can stand on ours. And I just want to say how grateful we are to know you and to be part of the same community. There's no better community on the planet than the one that you have let us become part of.
Thanks, Luis.
Yes, thank you for everybody for hosting this space. And we still have steps to go to make sure that we're securing rights, or securing immigrant rights for everybody. But this should give us hope that we're stepping in the right direction. And as we continue to move forward, please become engaged. The fight for immigrants' rights also starts at a local level, from allowing undocumented immigrants to have driver's licenses, to end the collaboration with Immigrations and Customs Enforcement and local law enforcement. And Public Counsel is doing tremendous amount of work doing that. If you're looking to help this movement too, please feel free to donate, like organizations like Public Counsel, who are doing this amazing work and really can only do it because the community comes together and says it's important. So I am so overwhelmed by the community support that we all feel, and it's really because it's a community win, because we're the ones who brought this to the forefront. And I'm very much looking forward to continue working with Public Counsel and partnering up in every way that we can, and to the community that showed up. And for the DACA recipients out there, we have a big win. We should take a moment to celebrate before we continue pushing forward.
Thanks, Luis. Gina?
Yeah, I just feel really honored to be an immigrants' rights advocate in this time, in this great time of awakening and reckoning in this country. And again, congratulations, Dreamers and advocates and everybody who made this victory possible. And I just look forward to the many fights ahead. Adelante.
Adelante. That's a good way to end. Thank you all. Hasta pronto. And we'll see you on the streets. Take care, everybody.